Any questions? Before I take this question for our friends online, it's last week there was a bug that you cannot see in full screen the image if you were using Safari. Now, some people have told me that they were using Safari in foreign countries, that it was working, but definitely it wasn't here in California. However, Chrome and Firefox were working. I don't know this time whether the bug has been fixed. If you encounter this problem, you may try to watch using Safari or using Chrome or Firefox. I don't know about Internet Explorer. So, yes. Problem?
Okay. I do have a small question, but before I do the question, I just want to make a little comment that I hope you'll find as funny as I do.
Not too close to the mic.
Oh, okay.
The comment.
A little over a year ago, I came here for a retreat, and I had also seen your videos on YouTube and read a book, and I just loved the retreat, and that was so much more than anything I could have imagined. And I came up to you afterwards when everybody was kind of gone and you were by yourself, and I started to tell you, thank you in about 4 different ways for opening your house, being a real person, not wearing a turban or anything, just simple, straight. Had trouble with the accent a little bit, but I was just thanking you over and over again. And every time I thanked you, your face wrinkled up more and more. And I couldn't understand what was happening. I thought, wait a second. I just told him that I've had the best experience of my life, way beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm thanking him for making that possible. And all he does is wrinkle his face as if he had eaten a handful of cockroaches and a bunch of garlic at the same time. That's the part I thought you would like, because I know you love garlic, right? So anyway, I thought, okay, I got it. And you didn't say anything. You just sat there with this look. And I go, okay, I think I better leave now. My wife was standing there with me. I looked at her and I go, okay, I think we should go. And I thought, it's like one of those Zen koan things, see? He could have said something, but he wants me to see deeper. So I'm going to go away and contemplate that. Well, the funny thing is I think I see now that who was talking to you, and you knew it, was the fictitious self came for that to get what he wanted to get, and he got what he wanted to get, and you knew that, well, okay, but that doesn't mean anything. And because that person was saying, I think I'm halfway down the path in 1 week. I mean, isn't this amazing? And I think that's why you were wrinkling up your face, like, how do I tell this guy? He's chasing another illusion. So You didn't speak. You just wrinkled the face. So anyway, I think I get the what happened now, and so I just wanted to say that.
Have you thought about whom you were speaking to?
Did I think about who I was speaking to?
No, at that time.
Well, I thought I was speaking to this guy that helped give me all the answers to all these riddles and stuff. Yes. You
see, and if you feel we are all like that, if we feel that we are addressed as a person, there is something in us that, unless we like to be a person, in which case we say, "Oh, thank you for thanking me. Oh, you are boosting my ego. That's nice."
Yes.
But other than that, there is something that we don't like to be addressed as a person. You see what I mean? At some point. And that's not that we don't like it, is that it's part of the spontaneous teaching, if you will. I didn't think about making a face, you understand? but I know that when that happens, it's not necessarily. I mean, there are moments, yes. If you say thank you to the self in that person, if you thank yourself, then it's received differently. But if you're expressing your gratitude to another person, then it's received as such, and it's.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you clarified that. Okay, but still, it's like there's nothing like this in the world. There's nobody I know that opens their house and sits and eats and drinks with people, and there's nobody. I don't think there's ever been anybody. So to me, that's a miracle. So I'm just grateful for that. Okay, so now my question. I was driving here today. Took 3 hours and 15 minutes, almost 200 miles, and I'm checking my clock and checking my navigation systems. Will I make it on time this morning? And I kept seeing the mileage go down and the time go down.
You live in Santa Barbara?
Yes, Santa Barbara. Yes, and.
There are a few friends of ours who live in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, the people that I met the people that used to be right down the hill.
Yeah.
I met them about a month ago. They started holding some meetings there. Anyway, I'm driving along and I'm going, wow. Okay, the longer I went, the more the time went. I think I'll make it on time. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful on the road to enlightenment that you had such navigation systems that would tell you, oh, yes, you're getting closer. But, of course, there isn't. And, in fact, I heard a video the other day saying, where you were saying, no, in my case, I think you said it this way, that one day I just turned around and looked and I noticed, oh, I haven't done that for years. So there cannot be any navigating or instant feedback or no awareness, no opening informs you or predicts anything. It's so you can't. And in fact, to even get worried about that or to even think about that would actually impede your real work. So I was seeing that like, well, it'd be nice, but no, it would just be the absolute wrong thing to do to focus on that because that's all theoretical. It's all imaginary. All there is to do is pay attention to what's here. So. So now, what happened to my question? I had a question there a minute ago. So on this path, it appears, and I guess I just wanted validation, unless maybe you could clarify, it appears that you just pay attention to, as you have said many times, pay attention to living impersonally. What is it like to live impersonally? And see what happens. Try to experiment with that. And just keep it simple. Don't try to overthink it or force it or anything because it has to sort of do its own thing. Is that
yes.
correct? That it has to just move in its own time in its own way, and any attempts to think through it or use any force or anything would just be the opposite of what you're really looking for, because it would take a personal self to do all that.
Yeah,
and so you're just creating a personal self.
To measure your progress, like when you have a child and you have a place in the house and you put him against the wall, and
yeah.
every month you you put a notch on the wall. That's not the way it works.
No.
And also because it is not something, it's not really the mind that what the mind can become aware of is always an afterthought. It's always in hindsight. And as I had often mentioned, you may be happy for one full month without problem, without a single cloud. And with your mind, you don't realize it. And after a month, someone tells you, you know what? This month has been wonderful, spending this month together. And you realize, yeah, geez, that's true. For 1 month, there was no cloud. Mm-hmm. You see, so if you can have a month without a cloud, that's as good as the rest of your life. In this body, you see, it's not bad, as a performance. You see, it's like playing tennis. If you can, in the beginning, you miss the first shot. After a few years, you can have a rally that lasts for, 3-4 shots. Then at some point, if you can have a rally that lasts for 50 shots, you're good, because then there is you can also have rallies. I had a guy in Northern California. He was Guinness world record of the longest tennis rally. I don't know, I don't remember. It was huge. It was 7 hours or 23 hours. And I remember I asked him, how did you go to the bathroom? He said, he kind of escaped my question. I said, oh, don't you do it? I don't remember. He told me that at the end of the rally, the ball had no felt at all, no fuzziness at all. It just had the
rubber,
the bare ball, of the fabric. Anyway, so to go from 50 or 60 or 100 shots to much more than that is not that difficult. It's the beginning. The stability is difficult in the beginning. That's why it's so. At the same time, it seems that when we catch ourselves red-handed, falling back into ignorance, it feels like a hopeless situation, and we tend to judge ourselves. Oh, here I go, I want again. Here I want again. Here I want. There I want again. There I want again. And whereas in fact, these moments were extremely efficient, because every time some step towards more stability was being made. So yes. It's like tennis.
So that's recently has been happening to me. Every time I would see some old emotion, some old thought come back, and I'm listening to it and reacting to it, I go, oh my God, it's all crashing down. But more recently, I realized, that's just the remnants. The remnants have to be addressed. So maybe I made some progress, punched some holes in the net, but there's still other parts of the net, and they're going to need to be removed before there's complete, So it's not a bad thing. It's actually normal, and actually maybe even a good thing. And I don't always like it for an instant until I realize what's going on. So there's I guess a history of, everything, wouldn't it be great if everything would go great for 30 days? You would like that. Now I'm giving up on 30 days. I don't care if it's 30 days or 1 day or never.
And there is a progress that we don't see personally, so to speak. We were not aware of it. and sometimes it feels that we have fallen into a bigger mess, whereas in fact someone from the outside, an external observer, says, oh, this guy is different, this guy is much better in his skin, whereas the feeling inside is that I am much worse off. And also, this feeling, this observation, so this gentleman or this lady is much better in his or her skin, whatever you express that in English, is not based usually on something rational. It's not because, oh, he or she is. It's something more global. When you see the person again, you see, for instance, in your case, I noticed something, and there was some fuzziness around you that has disappeared. You are sharper. You are more.
I shaved this morning. That's what.
No. It's not what I meant.
I know.
And I cannot express it. You see, I express it in just using analogies and not.
But don't give me a compliment, or I'll make a face.
Not using. Not using.
Just kidding.
It's not a compliment. It's an observation. And I remember my teacher telling me one day. He said, yes, you are more present. You see, perhaps that's what he meant. You are more present. You are more. There is a more, you are more better defined. I don't know how to express it for what it is worth.
No, you're right.
You don't know that.
Well,
you're not supposed to know.
I've been suspecting. So I'm glad that you confirmed that something maybe is shifting.
You're not supposed to know it.
But I had a session with Laura this morning. I had a head start.
Yes, the mind doesn't know. Meister Eckhart says somewhere, while God is doing his job in us, it's better if we are not aware that God is doing his or her job in us. Because then we are not in the way. Yes. So it's like the plumber. When the plumber is fixing your faucet or your drain under the sink, it's better if you are not there asking him, well, what is this tool for? What is that for? Are you sure you're doing the right thing? Then the guy is going to charge you $300 or more than the initial $500.
I'll try to remember that. Thank you.
Hello, Francis. So, how would you suggest or advise people to live a more heart-centered life on a moment-to-moment basis?
You come to a place like this, and first you understand things. And as a result of what you hear things, and you understand. Sometimes you understand right away on the spot. Sometimes you understand some, but your understanding is not well defined yet. So when you're on your own, you think about it again, and then at some point you say, oh yes, now I see. And then the next step is whatever you have understood, to put it, to apply it in your life. That's very simple. To put your money where your mouth is. Sometimes it's not that good. I put some money on the stock market, but too early last week.
Thank you.
When you put your money where your mouth is.
When
you put your money where your mouth is, and
you bought some more bitcoins.
Always. Yeah. When you do it with a non-virtual currency, what's the evidence that it was a proper gamble? Is there ever any doubt when that answer comes? Because I've taken a lot of these understandings and I've attempted to, okay, if that's true, and this is how I should act, and I do it, and I don't notice one way or the other if it's right. It's still very much unknown. And I'm wondering if there is any evidence that comes out of these experiments.
Yeah. The evidence is twofold, internal and external. Internally, you feel more peace. Externally, more serendipity. But we have to be careful to conduct these experiments in the proper way. Because the temptation is great to fool ourselves into expecting, I have a problem, and I want to fix a problem. Francis has told me that if I take the impersonal way, this problem will be fixed. But Francis has never said that. You see? Because then, whatever you do, if you do it in order to fix the problem serendipitously, whatever you do in order to fix serendipitously the problem that you had, is not going to be an impersonal action. You are going to delude yourself into believing that you are acting impersonally. For the action to be impersonal, or whatever it is that you do, to be impersonal, there needs to be zero personal interest in the outcome. You following me?
Is it acceptable for there to be personal interest, but it's recognized and set aside in the decision-making process?
Yes, if the only prerequisite for your action to be really impersonal is to do it for the sake of truth. Not for the sake of you as a person. Not for the sake of you as a truth seeker either. Not for the sake of you as a problem holder or a victim or having a problem that you want to solve. That's why it's a little tricky. You see what I mean? And that's why in the beginning, perhaps the outcome of the experiment is not clear because the experiment is not conducted in its proper form. The experiment is only about God, not about me. I don't know whether I am clear.
I think the position that I often take when I attempt the experiment, to a great extent, I've given up a lot on finding a solid truth. I keep coming to the conclusion of I don't know, and I'm not sure that I can know. And so the position that I take is what seems to be the right action, not necessarily for this human being, but for society at large. And I think that's probably where I stand when I attempt the experiments. And the answer just keeps coming back. I still don't know.
I'm not sure that society at large is the right deciding factor. It's still a very ignorant way of doing things. That's how you end up in being involved in politics. So you have to go back to your drawing board, because if that's the way you do things, it's all about God. It's not about society at large. Then forget about it. You're cooked. Then you become, I don't know, an activist of sorts or some. I mean, it's not bad. You see what I mean? But you are missing the mark because your action is about the world itself and not about God. This experiment that I'm talking about is not about the world. It's not at all about making the world a better place. Because the world is the place it is. Because God wants it to be that way. You see what I mean? There is a great arrogance in saying, okay, God, this place is not that great, I'm going to fix it. You see, that comes from the deepest ignorance. And that's a pitfall, that's the thing to avoid. Because it's only about God. It's not about the world. It may be that the best thing you can do, it is the case that the best thing you can do about the world as you act is to act for the sake of God. But if you act for the sake of the world, and your action is not directed towards God, it's not going to work. So that really is the idea of these experiments is to ask the question, is consciousness personal or divine? That's the question. It's not about the world. You see what I mean? It's about consciousness. That's a fundamental question we ask. And the way we ask this question is, in this context, if consciousness were universal instead of limited, would I think differently? Just think. Would I feel differently? Would I perceive differently? Would I act differently? But to act is only the fourth element of the experiment we are conducting. First come, would I think differently? Would I feel differently? Would I perceive differently? And then the action comes out of that as the icing of the cake. We tend, because if we are hypnotized by the world, we tend to do it in reverse order. And that would be a sign that we are hypnotized by the world. We tend to think first in terms of action. But we have first to look within about our own motives, our own thoughts, our own belief systems. So, right thinking, impersonal thinking, right feeling, right perceiving comes first, and they are the foundation for right action. If we have our own definition of what right action is going to be, such as whatever is better for the world, then whatever is better for the world will depend. If you're a Catholic, whatever is better for the world is that everybody becomes a Catholic. If you're a Muslim, what is the best for the world is that everybody becomes a Muslim. If you're a communist, what is better for the world is that everybody becomes... You see what I mean? If you're a Democrat, what is better for the world is for everybody to be a Democrat. If you're a Republican, what is better for the world is for everybody to become a Republican. Right? If you're an environmentalist, what is better for the world is for everybody to be an environmentalist. In other words, you are acting from a pre-existing belief system instead of acting from true unknown. And true unknown is consciousness personal or not? It is a totally different question. I'm not sure I am clear in what I'm saying. You see, to be interested in this, only in this point. Otherwise, you are something else. You are doing something else. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be active in the world, that we shouldn't, you see, but that comes down the road. And strangely enough, impersonal action can take different shapes and seem at odds with the action of another person, and they can both be impersonal. It is really, the experiments to be conducted is to ask the question, is consciousness impersonal? Or is this consciousness which is hearing these words right now, is it universal? And not to act from a predefined ethics, or to act from a predefined epistemology, or from predefined aesthetics. Epistemology, ethics, and aesthetics cannot be predefined. Because if they are predefined, they are dead. They get defined in context, always in context. In the moment itself. And it is important, as I said, to start with our thoughts. And not with any kind of thought, but the thought about me as a person, me as a separate consciousness. And every time we have this thought of me as a separate consciousness, for instance, as an experiment, to erase it, you take the eraser, and on top of that, you type, that's the old way, in the IBM with the sphere, right? And you retype on it impersonal consciousness. Every time you think of me, either be clear whether it is the body, the mind, the consciousness, but every time it is consciousness, erase and replace it with impersonal consciousness as an experiment. So that's a true mindfulness, if you will, of some Buddhist ways. The mindfulness doesn't apply to mind every object, but to be mindful when we feel separate, when we believe to be separate. That's when the mindfulness applies, really. And just to replace it as an experiment with the other thought, which is equiprobable, because
Equally probable.
An equiprobable outcome, right? Because when we have two possible outcomes, right, and when we have no valid reason whatsoever to assign probabilities to these two possible outcomes, and if they are the only two possible outcomes, the most rational bet is to assign 50% to each of these outcomes, right? If we know nothing else. So since we have assigned 100% to one of the outcomes for years, I mean, there is a lot of credit in the bank for assigning from now on 100% to the opposite outcome, right? Up until we have equalized.
Hi, Francis. I know that I'm thinking that this question might be too particular, but just even from what you're talking about, and I know every situation is different, but what would be an example of that? Like even possibly from your work when you were, I mean, I got the sense with your teacher, you said after 2 years you had no more questions, but I think I'm assuming that these experiments were going on in your life. Do any of them stand out for you that you remember? That was a...
Oh, many. I was conducting them all the time. For instance, once there was a meeting in Paris. I was director of tourism for the southwest of France. And the Minister of Tourism organized a meeting of the regional directors. And my teacher was having a retreat. So I took vacation, I went to my teacher's retreat, and I sent my deputy to the meeting with the minister, which is normally something you don't want to do, because the minister was organizing this meeting like twice a year, so he was expecting everybody to be there. You know? And so I was a little afraid of what the consequences might be, but it all went fine. They hardly noticed that I wasn't. You see, when you conduct experiments that are another time, it was before that. And it was a moment when I was making my first attempt at meditation. And at the time I was working in the missile, as you say here, business. And there was a meeting in Paris that was to design to the beginning of the next fighter jet for the French Air Force. And I guess they cannot sell right now, the Rafale, but that's a different question. You know, you start that like 25 years. I'm not responsible. 25 years or 30 years ahead of time. And so we were there to so there were experts for the engines, for the flights, for the construction of the airplane, for the radar system, for whatever, and for the weapon system, and for the missiles, right? And so there was this big meeting, and I just started meditating. And since it was my first attempt, I was a little worried that I was shutting myself out of whatever was being said in the meeting, and that I would be noticed, and I was young at the time, and that sometimes that would have consequences. So, nevertheless, as I make the attempt, I meditate. Everybody was talking. It started. And at some point, after hours of meeting, because there was a lot to be said, right? It's complicated to build a new plane. And after hours of meeting, someone said, well, Lucille hasn't said anything yet. What about the missiles? and I mean, there was another guy also for the missiles. I was not the only one, but they wanted to hear me. And in fact, although I had not listened, really to what had been said, strangely enough, whatever I needed to say, I said it. It made sense. Everybody was thankful that I hadn't taken too much of their time, And there were no adverse consequences, neither for the job, for the work that had to be done, nor for that I would look stupid, like not having paid attention and not knowing what we were talking about. So that was another example where I took the bet of God, of meditation, you see, in the world, I hope nobody from the... I mean, I'm 70 years old now, so I'm retired. I hope they are not going to cut my retirement. But I did my job, nevertheless. It worked.
Thank you.
But you see where the bet was there, right? It's an experiment. Mm-hmm. I was acting very differently from the way I would have been acting in the past.
So before that, you would have been quite involved.
Always, yes. Of course, like everybody else. Like most people. You see, in such a meeting, I would have been arguing, well, that shouldn't be done, no, that's not possible, no, you are stupid, no, you don't know better, no. Markita asks, how would you explain healing such as what Jesus was described as doing in biblical times? Miracles happen. But how do you explain miracles? The definition of a miracle is something that has no explanation, right? So how could I explain that which is not explainable? Thank you, Julian, for your feedback. So apparently only Chrome is okay to view the satsang full screen, so next time you can download Chrome until my service provider has fixed the bug. Essim says, I experience huge love sometimes for special people. This shows itself in a way that I feel happiness during the perception of this person. Although I tried, I cannot feel this love and happiness with every person. There is an openness there for all persons, but I cannot fall in love with every woman, for example. I often ask myself if this is ignorance.
No. We all know the answer to that.
It may be called discrimination. The love we are talking about here is impersonal. It has nothing to do with men, women, and this type of thing. It is love for consciousness in all beings, both animate and inanimate. You can have love for a mountain, like Ramana Maharshi, because you see the beloved in the mountain. You don't see the mountain, you see the beloved in the mountain. You can see the beloved in the Guru. You can see the beloved in a divine figure, in Krishna, in you can see the beloved in your mother, in your child, in your friend, in your partner, in your customer, in your boss, in the cop giving you a ticket. Of course, it's more difficult with the cop as he's giving you a ticket. But you may try, and that may save you a ticket. So we have to be very clear that it is not for the sake of a person that we love a person. It is for the sake of the self that we love a person. To see the self in all beings. To love the self, the consciousness in all beings. That's what it is about. And all it takes is in our interaction with this person to address the self, the consciousness in them, the universal consciousness in them. It's kind of jumping above the limited individual and talking directly to the consciousness. It's like forgetting the underlings and talking directly to the boss. No intermediaries, no directly to consciousness, seeing this person as the consciousness, and that accomplishes true miracles. And that's a kind of experiment you can conduct. And you'll see that it never fails if you do it properly as an experiment. You address your own self in that person. That changes completely the equation. Andrew says, I'm curious about the difference between attending your meetings online versus in person. Is there a transmission in the physical presence that is not there compared to online? Are physical meetings more conducive to awakening? I can only answer this question from my experience with my teacher. There was a difference. My teacher was not doing webcasts. I think webcast videos are better. Videos are better because you have the body language. Already, if you hear the sound of the voice, it carries something more than just reading something in a book. A book may have been edited, re-edited again. And although that may be better from the vantage point of aesthetics, there is a loss of spontaneity that takes place in this editing process. And so unedited, natural sound and video transmission is better in my view. That's why we are doing these webcasts. Now, still, something gets lost in transmission. And think about if you are in love with someone, would video conferencing through Skype be enough? So here you have it. You see what I mean? It's much better than writing letters. You know, in the old days they would write a letter. The beloved would receive the letter 20 days there, or 3 months later, if there was an ocean to be crossed, right? Then they will give the answer. You know, by the time the guy was dead on the other hand. What is nice also about the webcast is that you can ask the questions online. So this interactivity also is important. You can even ask follow-up questions. Yes, Aaron says, I believe the Indian Air Force is trying to procure Rafale. So your efforts may not have been in vain. Well, I'm not even certain that the plane was a Rafale because it was in the 70s, so it seems to be a little too old. It was one in between. Andrew. A few times I've reached an apparent threshold beyond which I feel I will lose any type of personal control over behavior and relating, etc. I then pull back out of fear of not being able to function in normal life. Is there any type of limbo period one must pass through where things are confused and difficult? Yes, but this limbo period is not where you place it. It is a period where you are at as the fear makes you pull back out of the threshold. So, gather your courage and cross the threshold. And then you'll be beyond the limbo period. And you won't regret it. And it requires for you to apparently lose personal control over behavior, and that which may give you the courage is to realize here and now that this seeming personal control you have over your own behavior is just a mock control. It's an illusory control because you don't control your thoughts. Therefore, you don't control your decisions. And if you believe that you control your thoughts, then try to have only happy thoughts. And then you'll be realized, right? Because you'll be always happy. So I offer you a very quick path to liberation if you believe that you have control over your thoughts. Just make sure you have only happy thoughts. Now, if you realize by conducting these experiments that in fact you have no control over your thoughts, if you don't have any control over your thoughts, there is no control you can lose, right? So be not afraid of losing control over your thoughts. If you have no control over your thoughts, you have no control at all because you have no control over your decisions. So wake up to the evidence that as a separate entity, your thoughts come to you. They are cosmic events like the weather. You have no control. There is no personal entity that can control them. So there is no control of your thoughts that can be lost. And then you may think, oh yes, but then I become psychotic or I become neurotic or depressed or whatever. Well, I have news for you. The people who are the more depressed and the more psychotics are the ones who are trying the most to control their thoughts.
Francis, earlier when you were speaking about the experiments, part of the experiment is when the thought comes up of I'm a person, you erase that and replace it with impersonal consciousness. But isn't that choosing thoughts or controlling thoughts?
Yeah.
You said we can't do that.
You didn't listen to me. What did I say?
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
I said, as a separate and personal entity, you have no control over your thoughts. So, where is your objection?
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, theoretically, yes, I understand.
You know, you were assuming that what I was saying to erase a thought and replace it, that was not possible. Based on what I had said, when I said that as a separate entity, we have no control over our thoughts. But you know, I didn't say that we don't have control over our thoughts, period. I said as a separate entity, we don't have control over our thoughts. Which means that the one who is of goodwill, the one who can erase the thoughts, is the love for the truth in us. And that can be done. You see, this enthusiasm, this freedom, the place from which the thoughts originate. But there is no personal controller there.
Okay, thank you.
Nice try. Okay, Sam. Beth, why does seeing the beloved or hearing, experiencing, make tears flow and one's heart break in a sweet kind of way? Is it simple release? And if so, what is this body-mind releasing? You are releasing the belief to be separate. You are open to what you are. You are touched by what you are. You touch the face of the beloved in that moment, and that makes the tears flow and the heart break in a sweet kind of way. Can one be free and not realize it? Let's put it slightly differently. Can one be happy and not realize it? You see, what is the meaning in this question of to realize that I am happy? Is the meaning to experience happiness, to realize happiness as an experience, or does it mean to draw the conclusion with the mind, now I am happy? You see, it's very different. To experience happiness and to think I am happy. So which one does it mean when you say, can one be happy and not realize it? If it means, can one be happy and not experience happiness simultaneously, obviously that's impossible. It doesn't make sense logically. Either you're happy or you're not happy, right? You cannot be happy and miserable. You cannot be in the sun and in the shade at the same time. So you have to choose. You are either walking on the sunny side of the street or on the on the other side. You cannot walk on both sides simultaneously unless you have very long legs. What? So the idea is that happiness knows itself. When we experience happiness, happiness is self-explanatory. We don't need to reach our conclusion with the mind. Now I am happy. I mean, it may happen to say that we say, oh yes, I'm happy, and then I go back to happiness. I'm too busy being happy to think continuously I am happy, because if I to think continuously I'm happy, that's a boring thought, right? I cannot maintain the thought I am happy. That would be boring, and that would just put an end to the happiness. So when we are happy, we know it experientially. We don't necessarily know it intellectually. That's the point. we may have insights that make us say, oh, yes, I'm happy. And then we go back to happiness. That's all there is about it. When you live the impersonal life, you know that your peace, your happiness is directly connected to the discovery of your true nature. It is your true nature unfolding, revealing itself constantly in ever new ways. And you don't think, I am realized. It's your... There is really nobody to think I am realized. And you don't see yourself as different from somebody else because we are all the same consciousness. We are all the same true nature. Any more questions here? Yes?
When the body dies, what does consciousness perceive?
At the end of a perception, what does consciousness perceive? It's not quite true. At the end of a perception, consciousness perceives itself. Because nothing as a blank, as an absence, is still an object. So, in order for consciousness to perceive nothing, a mind is required. Are you following me? Because a nothingness is still a mind object, is still a perception. So, at the end of a perception, consciousness perceives itself, in fact. So, the question is, I am rephrasing the question, at the time of death, what does consciousness perceive? It's tantamount to, if at the end of a perception, consciousness perceives itself, what does consciousness perceive at the end of all perceptions?
The only thing that's left is itself.
Itself, right? It's the same. That's why Krishnamurti used to say, we die with each thought. We die with each thought. Death is not unknown to us. We die with each thought, with each perception. So, what is important is for the interest, our interest, that was directed towards the perceptions, the objects, to be redirected towards that which perceives, consciousness. When that happens, there is already the experience of death. And it is not at all what we were afraid of, what we were afraid it might be. Like spending the rest of eternity in a tiny box in the dark without TV. That which we love, that we are truly attached to, we cannot lose it. We cannot lose the reality. We cannot lose our reality. The reality will always be here. Ramana Maharshi, when he was dying, he would say, well, you are sad because you don't know where I am going. But I am going nowhere. I'm staying where I am. Our reality, which means that which we truly are, our true self, is the reality of all beings, is the reality of the world. There is only one reality. This reality is here to stay. So when the body disappears, that which remains is still the totality, the reality. When you remove something from this reality remains as a whole, in its wholeness. Nothing can be really, it's a different type of mathematics that apply there. Although in mathematics, infinity minus a finite sum is still infinity. So if we see ourselves as something finite may disappear. But whatever you subtract from the infinite reality of consciousness, it remains infinite.